Oh, are you biking?
No. The bikes are loaded. We're just leaving. We're driving. We're just leaving Harvey's Lake. Let me put you on speakerphone.
That's right. You guys don't live there anymore. You have to.
Absolutely beautiful weather. It's the first time we biked in, what do you think, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? Because Dad was sick for 3 weeks, and then I was away, and then there was some really stinking cold weather.
It was my shofar.
How was your week? I saw your pictures. When did you do the hike?
We did 2 hikes. One last weekend and one yesterday.
Oh, the one from yesterday? That's the one that got posted. I saw something on Facebook. I want to go and hike. Yeah, it looks beautiful. Who takes the pictures? You or
Alex? I don't do
Alex
pictures.
Takes them? Oh, I thought maybe Dan was the photographer. I didn't know. I thought you were both in some of them. Maybe not. Okay. So, Alex is the artist. Nice job, Alex.
She is. She likes her photos. Alex.
I don't know why I was thinking it was Daniel. I'm sorry.
No, I just like to run around and climb stuff. I'm not a picture taker. So I have some thoughts here before we get started on the Torah portion.
What do you have?
Some thoughts. It's on Shechem. Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and Daniel and Melkon are listening in.
Oh.
So don't say anything mean about Daniel like you usually do.
What?
Just kidding. How come you can never hear me?
I don't know. I keep asking you how I'm supposed to turn up the speakerphone. You haven't helped me, so. But I did go in the
volume up button.
Everything to max so I could turn up. So I don't know. Maybe it's the way the phone is.
Well, I'll try to yell, and you stop me if you don't understand. If I start speaking in tongues. All right. So you asked this question before about Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, and what was the point of the blessings and the curses, which is also in this Torah portion. So there's some interesting history on that location. So in between them is a valley called Shechem. So Shechem has a history because that's where Abram, before he was Abraham, made the covenant with Yahweh, where they cut the animals in half, and Abram fell asleep, and Yahweh walked the blood path for him, so he made the covenant for him, showing that he would redeem him for not doing his part. So there's a promise of Jesus there, Yeshua. So that was in Shechem. So that was in between Gerizim and Ebal.
Was Shechem also the site where the rape of Dinah?
It was. Okay. That's the next one. But also, and this one's more interesting, because the 12 brothers were supposed to have been herding their flocks at Shechem. So Joseph goes to check up on them, being like, what are you doing? And they weren't even at Shechem. They went to Dothan, which is to the north, so that would be on the Mount Ebal side. But if we look at it, his father Jacob was in Hebron, so that means they traveled over 100 miles to tend the flocks. So this is a Nate theory. I didn't hear anyone else say this, but it was just funny because I listened to 3 different teachings, and all of them mentioned Shechem, and they each had their own little insight on it. So I'm going to talk about all 3 of those. This is the Nate one, is that because later on Joshua builds an altar in Shechem. So I think they were actually sent to do sacrifices. And the reason they went to Dothan, whatever it's called, was because they knew that's where the caravan road was, and they were going to sell the animals instead for money, and just be like, oh yeah, we did the sacrifices, Jacob, because he was too old to travel. So they went and did the sacrifices for him, but they didn't sacrifice him. They're going to sell him for money, and there's no way he would have known anyways. So Joseph comes up, and they're like, oh no, he found us out. So that was another reason they had to betray him, because he was going to say that we didn't sacrifice the animals. And that's why they sold him into slavery too. How do you think about that theory?
I think it's a theory.
Because why would they travel 100 miles just to, they didn't have like fields, like a mile away. They had to go 100 miles to tend the flock. It makes no sense.
You're right, it doesn't. I mean, even with considering the land and at that point that it might not have been great grazing land all over the place, but still.
And this ties into the next one here, because Shechem continues on, because there's 12 brothers, and then we have in this story the Deuteronomy, and we're in where does it start? Deuteronomy 26, if you guys are reading along. But it's half the tribes are on Ebal to the north, and half are on Gerizim, and there's a natural amphitheater in Shechem. So if you would just speak, it'd be really loud, because it's just the way the land is there. So they would shout the blessings to the north and to the south, or shout the blessings to Gerizim, which is actually in the direction of Judah, which I think is interesting, and the curses towards Ephraim in the north, which would have been the northern kingdom in the future, kind of showing that who of the two houses was the naughty ones. Kind of predicted that, as they go into Assyrian exile, because pretty much all their kings were bad and they were worshiping other gods and all that, which we'll get into later, because Ezekiel talks about that, and some of the connected portions talk about that. But let's try to stick here in Shechem for a second. So we have the picture of the 12 tribes being the 12 brothers that Joseph went after. And also in Joshua 24 talks about Joseph's bones being buried in Shechem. So this place is special. And this is a theory of someone that in Shechem is where the two trees of the garden stood. So you had the tree of knowledge and good of evil would have been on Mount Ebal, and the tree of life would have been on Gerizim. And to the east of Eden, directly east of Shechem, is Babylon. So when they were kicked out of the garden, they went to Babylon. So it might have been the site of the garden, according to this unnamed person that I won't say. But what do you think about that theory?
Sure. Yeah, it's a theory.
It's a theory.
Theories are interesting.
So let's read some passages here. Just to recap the covenants. This is what I sent to you before, but I'll read it again. I'm just going to read. I put this in my blog post, which is Hosea. Hosea was Israel divorced. So here's a snippet from that. I'll read. So I've come to see the covenants Yahweh has made with his people as a marriage relationship. So the Abrahamic covenant was about faith. So that happened at Shechem. So that was the wedding ceremony of Yahweh and Israel. And then the Mosaic covenant was about obedience. So the marriage vows between both parties that would keep the bond strong. And I see that being portrayed here in this Torah portion. So they were given the covenant and the Torah, but actually at this site, they were to take stones of lime to build the altar, because limestone, you can write upon it. And they were to write the whole Torah on the limestones, the entire Torah on these stones. And then they were pronounced these blessings and curses. It's just almost like a marriage covenant. So that's what we see with that kind of being connected here with them actually saying it. You actually have to say your vows, not just I mean it in my heart, but actually to say it and pronounce it. And then the third covenant here, and each of these covenants don't, annul the other covenant. They're all built upon the same covenant, is the new covenant or the renewed covenant. So this is about grace. So we had faith, obedience. We need to be obedient to our faith, because faith brings about action. And then grace, because in this Torah portion, it says that anything we do wrong, even if we mess up one time, that we've broken the covenant. So we need a redeemer. It's always about having a redeemer. So that is the grace part. So the renewed covenant is Israel divorcing herself by not keeping the marriage vows, and the relationship had to be renewed. So redeeming the bride is a process that involved Yeshua's death and resurrection as a new bridegroom and his second coming. Just as in Jewish culture, a man would go away for a year to build his home for a bride before bringing her there. You okay with that? Or is that just another theory?
No, actually, that's very good.
So I wanted to read from Ezekiel 37. This is not a connected portion, but it brings about some things that we just talked about here. So this is the dry bones. And the first thing he says in Ezekiel 37:1 is, and I'm going to post a video with me going through all these scriptures, so you don't have to look them up later, so you guys can check them out. Carried me down in the middle of a valley. So we don't know what valley it was, but it's full of bones. So the reason Shechem was important, because Joseph wanted to be buried there to be near his father, and most of Israel was born there. So this might be that Ezekiel is going to Shechem. That's just another theory I have, but I think it's a cool one. So it's talking about the dry bones being brought together. That's my verse here. Try to be prepared. Sorry. 37. I didn't even write it down. What's wrong with me? I know I wrote it down somewhere. All right.
I think you're doing good. I actually enjoyed these Bible verses more than anything else I've done so far.
This was a good Ezekiel 37:16. Okay. So you, human being, take one stick and write on it for Yehuda and those joined with him. I'm reading from the Complete Jewish Bible, if you're wondering why that Yehuda, but that's Judah. Those with him, the people of Israel. Next, take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel who are joined to him. So that makes sense. We'd be talking about Shechem here because he's talking about the two houses of Israel being rejoined. So this is, Ezekiel's after the Assyrian captivity and the division between the two houses of Israel. That point in history, and they didn't like each other, and we'll go to Isaiah 11 to see why they didn't like each other. Let's read. So Isaiah 11:1, but a branch will emerge from the trunk of Jesse, a shoot will grow from his roots. The spirit of Adonai will rest on him, the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and power, and the spirit of knowledge and fearing Adonai. He will be inspired by Adonai. He will not judge by what his eyes see or what his ears hear, but he will judge the impoverished justly. This is talking about, Jesus, obviously. He will decide fairly for the humble of the land, and he will strike the land with a rod from his mouth and slay the wicked with a breath from his lips. And this sounds a lot to me like the second coming. So it's not when he first came. So he's coming back to punish those who aren't doing their jobs. Skipping ahead a little bit. To verse 10, on that day, the root of Jesse, which stands as a banner for the peoples, the Goyim, other Gentiles, will seek him out. So we're going to obviously visit Romans 11, which is probably your favorite because it talks about being grafted in. Goyim will seek him out. And I was in the connected portion, so I'm not just pulling things out of my butt like usual. Goyim will seek him, and the place where he rests will be glorious. On that day, Adonai will rest his hand again a second time to reclaim the remnant of his people who remain among Asher, Egypt, Patros, Ethiopia, Eliam, Shinar, Hamat, and the islands in the sea. He will hoist a banner for the Goyim. Gentiles assemble the dispersed of Israel and gather the scattered of Judah from the four corners of the earth. And this is an important verse here. And Ephraim's jealousy will cease. Those who harass Judah will be cut off. And Ephraim will stop envying Judah. And this is what I want you guys to comment on. And Judah will stop provoking Ephraim. So how does that look today is my question, because this seems like a very end-time prophetic passage. What is Ephraim's jealousy? And how will they be cut off? And how is Judah vexing or provoking Ephraim? And what does that mean? While you're giving me your answers, I will go to Romans 11 to read a little bit from that, because that's connected here. Because he's talking about, the two sticks being joined together, and we get the idea of being grafted into Israel. So as Gentiles, and I've also heard taught that Gentiles, Judea thought at the time of Jesus that the Gentiles, they actually considered those of the northern kingdom Israel to be Gentiles. They didn't consider them part of Israel anymore, that they were divorced and no longer, and they needed to either join Judah and be a part of that, or they weren't a part at all. So they were considered Gentiles, because Gentiles means every nations, and probably Daniel will correct me on that, but they were scattered amongst the nations. And that's what Goyim is. So when Paul's addressing this, chapter 11, I would suggest everyone to read, and I would suggest reading it in the Complete Jewish Bible, because it gives you a little different perspective, and try to think of not just Israel and Judah, but them being, Gentiles being two separate things. Because when we think Israel and Judah, yeah, everyone who is in Judah is an Israelite, but how was I going to say that? Yeah, everyone who is part of the tribe of Judah is an Israelite, but not everyone that's an Israelite is part of Judah. And Judah kind of forgot that, I think. Did I say that backwards? Does that make sense? Yeah. And I like verse 16, because it says, "Now if the challah," because I made some last night, "offered as first fruits is holy, so is the whole loaf. And if the root is holy, so are the branches. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, a wild olive, were grafted in among them, and have become equal sharers in the rich root of the olive tree, then don't boast." So this is kind of referencing what we just read in Isaiah. "Don't boast as if you were better than the branches. However, if you do boast, remember that you are not supporting the root. The root is supporting you. So you will say, 'Branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in.' True, but so what? They were broken off because of their lack of trust." So I think this is talking about some of the tribes being broken off because they didn't actually do commandments. They didn't keep the Torah. So they were broken off. But then Gentiles were actually grafted in. So however, you keep your place only because of your trust. So don't be arrogant. On the contrary, be terrified. For if God did not spare the natural branches, which he's talking about, the 12 tribes, he certainly won't spare you. So take a good look at God's kindness and his severity. On the one hand, severity towards those who fell off, but on the other hand, God's kindness towards you, provided you maintain yourself in that kindness. Otherwise, you too will be cut off. Moreover, the others, if they do not persist in their lack of trust, will be grafted in, because God is able to graft them back in. For if you were cut off out of what is by nature a wild olive tree and grafted, contrary to nature, into a cultivated olive tree, how much more will these natural branches be grafted back into their own olive tree?" Pretty cool. So we have what? Repeat.
Who is the wild olive branch? Is that me?
It's Gentiles, or it could actually be those who are cut off, can actually be regrafted in. So if we consider that the 10 tribes, which we might get into because one of the extended passages was Matthew, which talks about the 10 virgins. So if they were cut off, you can actually be regrafted back into the tree. So you become a Gentile. If you were an Israelite and you go out living among the nations, you're like the parable of the prodigal son, you go off and do your own thing, then you're actually cutting yourself off from God, and you're grafting yourself to the world. And it could be also people have never heard of, the Bible or the Torah or Jesus, can actually be grafted in if they were a Canaanite or whatever and never heard of anything like this, can be part of the tree. So there's two answers to that. I have not looked at the comments in a while. I apologize. So Daniel says Ephraim was jealous because they were divorced, whereas Judah wasn't, so Ephraim was considered Gentile. And I would agree with that. And Gentile comes from the Latin for common. And we could think common, maybe referring to meat, which was common, which was good meat, like beef could be good, but if it was offered to idols, then it became bad or against Torah.
I was taken with the curses, the type of curses, the extent of curses, the warnings given, and the amount of time, attention, and detail to the curses given to those who are in disbelief or have lack of faith or don't. I was wondering if there also those who could have talked about then it's not really enough to have faith. You have to put your faith into action and be producing for the kingdom, essentially, in my paraphrase.
Yeah, there needs to be fruit. What type of fruit is better?
The darker the vegetable, the higher the phytonutrient content. He's going off on a nutrition thing.
There might be something there. I had some more things about Shechem. Some other cool things happened at Shechem. Or maybe just one other cool thing. When he's talking to the woman at the well, it was at Shechem.
Yeah.
She was a Samaritan. And she even mentions Mount Gerizim where the people worship. And the reason he went to Shechem should be a sign to show you that he still considered them part of Israel.
Yeah, there's a book that you might be interested in. It's called Walk the Land. I forget who the author is, but it was a Christian that years ago in studying Israel did basically that. They took every site, especially if it is repeated multiple times in multiple passages with multiple stories throughout Israel, and talked about them and ties them together. It's really pretty neat. We use it when we travel with a group. It was called Walk the Land.
To check that out, Walk the Land. So we got some things from Daniel I wanted to read. He quoted Jeremiah 3:8. She saw that for all the adulteries of that faithfulness one, Israel, I had sent her away with the decree of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister, Judah, did not fear, but she too went and played the whore. So they both were naughty. And that's where we get that idea of being divorced. I missed all the cool Shechem stuff. Oh, it's because I'm yelling because she can't hear me. All right. So any questions? I had some more stuff to talk about, but I think that's it for Shechem. Any thoughts on Shechem or the rest of the Torah portion? We can get into some of the parables that were talked about too, if we want to.
Let me flip to my pages. I made a few notes and a few questions. I don't think it was on anything we talked about yet.
And while you're looking, I'll say this. I think the very first verse is interesting because it says, "And it shall be when you are to come into the land," key Tavo is when you come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance, and possesses it and dwells therein. And he's saying everywhere you put your heel is going to be yours. And in Genesis, when the serpent was told that it would strike the heel, he was trying to prevent us from claiming what should be ours, which was, where Yahweh dwelled, his holy land. And I think that we even see that with Shechem, that's where the garden was. This is something important. This is Yahweh's land. It's not the Jews' land. It's Yahweh's land. And I think that's important. Everywhere you press your heel, And that's why the serpent wanted to strike the heel. It wasn't just because it was the only thing he could reach. He was trying to prevent us from claiming what was ours, the land. That was a cool thing I heard as well. Daniel says hi, Alex.
I think I came away really, like I said, I like these verses better than a lot of the past weeks for how much, probably it's more meaningful to me, essentially.
There's this thing called the cut and paste Bible where you can just cut out the parts you don't like and put in the parts you do like.
Yeah, I didn't mean it that way. I mean, in terms of it coming home and really convicting me more than some of the past ones. I forget where I was reading in the verses. Under the theme of justified. I know what it was. The talking. Where is it? Luke? No. It might be Luke 23:26. Let me go check.
That was, yeah, there's Luke 21 was, Luke 21 and 23 were both in there.
26. Yeah.
I don't have any notes on this part, so that'd be good if you had some insight. I got distracted by Shechem. If you didn't notice.
Yeah, Shechem was a pretty fascinating place in terms of all the different things, the variety and diversity things that happen there.
Melcon wants me to read Deuteronomy 26, 17 through 19 while you're looking for stuff.
All right, let me look that up. Deuteronomy says 26.
26, 17 through 19. Thou, maybe I should not read it from King James. I will, though. Thou hast avouched the Lord this day to be thy God, and to walk in his ways, and to keep his statutes and his commandments, and his judgments, and to hearken unto his voice. And the Lord hath avouched thee this day to be his peculiar people, as he hath promised thee, that thou should keep all his commandments, and to make thee high above all nations, which he made in his praise, and in his name, and in his honor, and that thou mayest be a holy people unto the Lord thy God, as he hath spoken of. Good verse, Melcon. Peculiar people.
Were all conditional.
What was that?
I said the promises were all conditional.
Except for the Noah's covenant. He promised he would never cover the world in the flood again. We weren't actually required to do anything to stop that. I just had to shoot you down. I don't know why. I don't know why I did that. This is my personality.
No, it's a good point.
So it's your fault.
Actually, I'm reading along with these verses, and I get up to 28, where it talks about the Lord will grant that the enemies who rise up against you will be defeated before you. They will come at you from one direction, but flee from seven. And I think about times in my life that I've seen that, and I'm getting all built up thinking, yeah, God is definitely blessed. And then you get in reading about Jesus talking about scattering the seeds and his interpretation of it, the plants, and I realize I'm basically a one that's in the thorns. I'm easily distracted.
Yeah. I mean, that was on my heart this week too. Like, just I've been listening to Wars of the Jews, and that's a hard book to think about. These people believed in God, just suffering so much at Jerusalem, and then reading Masada, and I listened to Eliezer's speech that he gave. I don't know how he got his speech if everyone died there except for that one family. But even he said, like, because there was, they were battering down the one wall, so they built the wooden wall, and the Romans set fire to that wooden wall, and it was burning, and this wind almost started blowing the fire towards the Romans to destroy their siege engines. And then the wind just turned the other direction and started burning down the wall again into Masada, and Eliezer recognized it, that God had turned his face from them, and that he just acknowledged it because it was their sin that Jerusalem was destroyed. It was their sin and they were going to die now because Yahweh was no longer with them because of their sin. It was so heartbreaking. And they all just decided to commit suicide. And I'm like, that's just a bad day. Like, what do you do with that? And that ties back into these blessings and curses here. And
it also ties in with where Jesus, at one point, with one of the verses you had too, where Jesus says to the women that you will suffer, that you'll regret. Those same people he talked to were the ones that would have gone through the wrath of Titus took on Jerusalem when he conquered it. And also that fulfilled the prophecy that not one stone would turn on another or would remain on
another. Yeah. And if we read Josephus, from his perspective, but him being a Levite, it's like he never really blames the Romans. Daniel says that during the siege of Jerusalem, the women ate their own children, which I think was prophesied in the Olivet Discourse. But just like the Jews brought it on all themselves, they were infighting amongst themselves. They defamed the temple far before the Romans even got there, and they were murdering people and stealing food, and they caused all this. And the Romans just wanted, peace. They didn't want to burn the temple down or destroy it. It was this rebellion. And I think really, because their blindness that Paul talks about in Romans, that Judah brought this on themselves because they didn't recognize Yeshua.
And it wasn't the first time, though. I mean, they had it happen with the Assyrians. They had it happen with the Babylonians.
Those were Jewish women,
Really took is they were to have no other gods before them, the ones that did have God. I mean, from then on, they were definitely cured of making sacrifices to the Canaanite gods. They never went back to any of that. The ones that were believers, they never tolerated it. But going back to Deuteronomy 28, where it gets into, like, specifically verse 32, your sons and daughters will be taken into another nation. All of that was told in advance.
Couple times. Yeah, 32. Thy sons and daughters will be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand.
So that had already come to be at least twice by the time of Jesus. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. Because they'd seen it happen, they had learned part of their lesson, they just hadn't taken it up. Even if you look at the Jews today, though, they're still, I mean, you got your strong Hasidic type Jew that's all about the laws and just, being fervent, and they're much more fervent than anybody else. And you've got this huge disagreement among the Jews. I mean, to this day, the running joke is where you got two Jews, you got three opinions.
Well, we as Christians aren't much better.
Oh, no, not at all. We're probably worse. How many Protestant denominations there are to fight each other constantly while the world is going the way it's going. inability to unite and work for the common, because they're going to argue about who's free this and free that and post this and post that.
It touches home. It touches home, and there's a few good thoughts on that, because I don't think division's always a bad thing, because two men cannot walk together unless they be in agreement. That doesn't mean you have to be in full agreement. There's like core values like Jesus and dying and rising for our sins. That's a core value, and I think people can band together. You could be in agreement on that. Like if you have that, it's like the Bible is good. That's a lot to agree on, and all these other little things that we divide over are not worth it. So you can still walk together with someone and have studies with someone if one thinks shrimp is bad and the other one doesn't, and you shouldn't stop being friends and having discussion over that. There still could be a respect, and you can still learn from each other.
Who else is like family? That's what I said. I was reading about those verses where it talks about God will protect you, and I was thinking about all I went through with Aunt Mary, for example. I mean, absolutely God fought that battle for me. But then I get to the verses in Matthew where it talks about sowing the seeds, and I'm realizing, okay, I'm just a thorn. I'm the thorns. And I think what I meant, this is a lot. These verses taken together were and very convicting. Convicting about the purpose of life, convicted about what we're supposed to do with our faith once we have it. This wonderful gift that we're giving, then what we're supposed to do about it, that we're going to be justified by more than just having accepted and having had faith. It's by, especially the verses in James, to actually go out and do and put feet to our faith, or works to our whatever, however you want to call it. So then you think about Jesus talking about the seed being sown, and
yes.
Okay, so where in heaven's name are we where that is not? And people really got honest with yourself, and really, where are you at with that? Because when it comes to it, that's all that's going to matter, really.
And fruit could probably mean different things to different people. Like some people think fruit and they think money, but like fruit for God could then wisdom, and it's not always about like prosperity gospel teaching, like your best life now, Joel Osteen idea. It's that fruit can really look differently, and I think he kind of gives the answer there in Matthew 13, what you're talking about, right after the seeds. He said the disciples are like, why do you speak in parables? And he answered them, because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. For whosoever hath to him shall be given, he shall have more abundance. But whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away even that he hath. Therefore speak I to them in parables, because they see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand. So you gotta be grounded, which kind of ties back into what he was talking in the parable before, that only the seed that fell on the good soil grew and brought forth fruit. So what is that? The good ground, I think, is Yeshua. You need to be grounded in Yeshua, which is the living word. And if you want to say that another way, it'd be the living Torah. Because we didn't have the New Testament when he was telling this. Obviously, Matthew hadn't been written till after his death. So the word gospel he's referring to then would have been the Jewish Tanakh, Old Testament.
And yet, when all is said and done, Luke 23, where it talks to the criminal on the cross next to him that recognizes him, he says to him, the guy declares his guilt, and yet Jesus says, you're going to be with me in paradise. Certainly there were no works there then, so that was nothing but faith. on the flip side, it's really neat that he became an instrument that gets recorded in God's word of exactly that, as an example. Maybe that's why I got to go to paradise. You did the right thing at the right time.
Yeah, it's not about all the good you do. It's about dying to yourself. I think I was listening to Jim Staley speak, and that's what he's talking about. I think you die to yourself, because otherwise everything else is about money. And then the teaching I was listening today is it's like God's of wood and God's of stone. Paper is made from wood, and money, it's paper, so it's another god, and stone is coins, gold. Like, do we have gods of wood and stone? Yeah, we do. I thought that was a good point. We need to die to ourselves and not hold on to these earthly things. We can't be grafted into two different trees. I can't be like, oh, I'm grafted into Yeshua, but I'm also going to be super popular. And no, you're called to be a peculiar people set apart. And you're probably going to look strange, and most people are going to disagree with you. You're not going to be Mr. Popular. And if you are, you got to wonder if you're doing things right. The world should hate you.
So if you want to throw a real wrench into all of this and get everybody up in arms and arguing, here's something for you. Go into Matthew 25, where it goes to the sheep and the goats, and it gets up to verse 37. It says, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When do we see a stranger and invite in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When do we see you sick or in prison? And the king will reply, I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. So, if you talk about the situation at the southern border, we're letting illegal aliens in and feeding them and clothing them and caring for them and giving them. Where does all that sit today?
That's a good question. I think Daniel will comment on this, but let me.
I think it's just fun about it for the rest of the weekend. The city has walls outside.
Yeah. And as far as like strangers coming in and feeding them and clothing them, that's fine. But as far as them becoming citizens, okay, there's a way to become a citizen of Israel, just as there's a way to become a citizen of the United States. So just because a stranger's coming in doesn't mean you can break all the laws and not keep Torah and go like, hey guys, I'm gonna go offer a pig on the temple altar. That's not okay. We need to take care of them, but they can't come in and start breaking our laws. And living amongst us is breaking one of our laws. You have to become a citizen the right way. And there's nothing stopping them from doing that, applying for citizenship and going through the right channels. And yeah, like Daniel says, sojourners should keep the laws. And he also says brothers. And it says brothers in these passages. So a brother would have been someone who is a fellow Israelite, a law keeper. Because if you didn't keep the laws, you were kicked out or you were stoned to the gates. You weren't a part of the people. And America is not Israel, obviously, but because in the future kingdom, when Yeshua comes, he's coming as a dictator. It's going to be a monarchy, and his law will be Torah, I believe. And we are going to have to, he's going to rule with an iron rod, I think it says, and we're going to have to obey him. And I think there's going to be a lot of people, even in the church, that won't go for that. Because they'll be like, that's about freedom and how I feel. And why is it, he should be about love and acceptance? Because half the church is painting this picture of Jesus that is just feel good, happy, It's okay to do whatever you want. Grace, 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 hyper grace. And then there's another story being taught when he comes back in the second coming. He's coming with fire and destruction and an iron rod to rule. And in a lot of people's minds, that sounds like the Antichrist. And I think that's why even the elect will be confused. Daniel's got more comments here.
Well, I'm going to come down to the fact that there's laws for a reason, and we're also to obey the laws. But I just thought it was an interesting take on that.
Yeah, and then
What did you say, Daniel?
Daniel says, we are harshly judged by how we treat our brothers and sisters we are commanded to take care of. Foreign dominators, such as the Romans, are an opportunity to extend grace. Second mile. Illegal aliens are foreign invaders. Daniel taking the hard road.
Well, I feel that you're giving us something to argue about.
Yeah, I think it's always, there's a place for improvement in all things, that we could probably be nicer, but just saying, hey, come on in, it's going to decay us from the inside out and destroy us. So it's not actually best. And a lot of these laws are like that in the Torah. It's like they may not make sense to us face value. It might seem harsh, but all of these laws are about love. If we believe what Jesus says about, love God, love your neighbor, all the rest of the Torah and prophets hangs on these two commandments, then they should all be about love. So if we think that way, it changes. Okay, well, how is this about loving? How is this about loving my neighbor? How is this commandment about loving God? Like stoning the drunkard's son, like in the last portion. It's like, that doesn't seem loving. I'm sure we could just get a therapy session going on. Maybe there's just some deep inner things, and next thing we know, he's shooting up a school. And that's not loving to the community, because this evil person was not taken care of as instructed by Torah. So love isn't always loving at face value.
It doesn't say love. It says feed them, clothe them,
It's love.
care for them.
It's love. It's loving.
It doesn't say anything about loving them. Not there anyway. I mean, those other places, but it's there.
I think the point still stands.
Well, obviously it would be motivated by love, but also motivated by a desire to put works to your faith.
Because then you might be putting a foreigner above your brother, because it's harming those already living in the land. If these people are coming in not paying taxes, it's disrupting everything. So it's not loving to the rest of the community to allow this. So there's an appropriate way that a sojourner could become a citizen and part of Israel. All right, Melkon, hurry back. Yeah, that's what I say. I had some more thoughts on heels, though. Some curious things. Since I talked about heels before. Unless you want to keep arguing over immigrants.
Oh, I didn't want to argue at all. I just thought it was interesting that those specific verses could be used by different opinions, different ways, period. Yeah. Okay, where are we now?
Daniel says that even foreign nations were judged by how they mistreated Israel. Yeah, like it says, if those who bless Israel will be blessed, those who curse Israel will be cursed. So, and we are instructed to extend kindness to strangers. So before I was talking about, the heel, everywhere they put their heel would be their inheritance when the people came into the land. Ruth uncovered Boaz's, feet and laid by his heels. So in a way, she was saying, "I am your property," which I thought was cool. And it says she came under his wings, which would have been his tzitzits. And then we see Yeshua washing the disciples' feet, and you got to hold the heel when you wash the feet. So he was saying that they would have power wherever they put their feet, as far as the apostles go. And I don't know how I feel about like the new apostolic Reformation saying that they're apostles today. I don't know how that works. We haven't had Jesus wash your feet. And they're saying that they're the latter rain and they're doing miracles today, like Bethel Church. And it's like, you don't have enough faith. If you're sick, if you have cancer, you just didn't have enough faith because God will heal anything. There was a lady at the office that I'd get in arguments with because she was very part of that whole Reformation, that God should be able to talk to you with a literal voice and that you should actually be able to heal people. And like, that's the mindset that's invaded the church, riding on the wings of, metaphysical spiritualism and Eastern thought. Welcome back, Melkon. How did I get there from heels? It's just a random. That was. But any thoughts on that? I thought that was cool things about the heels, and the serpent wanting to attack the heel. A couple cool connections. I'm sure there's more connections that I just need to think about.
I thought it was interesting that you ended up talking about feet.
Like feet. Working on a lot of broken feet. Broke my own heels. Yeah, I wonder what that means. Now I can't get any inheritance because my heels are broken. Anyone have thoughts on the end times and the second Exodus? Just because, they're going into the land at this point. And since we were talking about the two-house theory and all of us being scattered, and all these, like I read from Ezekiel and Isaiah, and even Romans 11 talks about us all coming back to Israel. So what does that look like? How is that done? Let's hear from all the people. I'm gonna let Alex take over while I use the bathroom.
Who's talking now? Daniel? Hello? What happened? You haven't had a battery? No? Hello? Somebody there?
Why aren't you answering her? Hello?
Hi, was Daniel talking because I couldn't hear him?
No. I assumed Alex would continue the conversation. I'm back.
Oh.
I was just answering the call of nature. What was your thoughts on that?
Who are you asking?
Anyone?
All right, end times. It's about end times. It's fascinating to me how much, again, discord and conversation and things there is when they said no one knows the hour. I think clearly we're supposed to be spending our time doing other things like serving and working and praising and not worrying about knowing when the end time is going to be or deciding about it. But it clearly says no one's going to know. That's kind of always been my opinion on that, but you ask my opinion, that doesn't count.
So Melcon agrees with you. And I agree to a point. Live in the now. I think we need to be mindful of the future so we don't get deceived, because there's going to be false prophets coming. So that I think the scripture is clear in a few ways that we should at least understand how things will turn out. It's like the book of Revelation is there for a reason. It should be read, and anyone who reads it is blessed. It's the only book to actually bless you for reading it. So in that way, you just can't say, whatever, Revelation. It doesn't matter. We need to read that. We need to have an awareness so we're not deceived. Yes, we need to be grounded in good soil, an understanding of the gospel, Yeshua, and these first 5 books. But I think also understanding his second coming is important. Thoughts? Tater tots and thoughts?
In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
I'm pretty blind. Yeah, I got a like. Man, I never get any likes anymore. Thanks for the thumbs up, or thumbs up. Well, you gonna go deeper on that, Father? Just gonna leave us with a cryptic quote and back out?
There is no vision, the people perish.
The land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. What do you mean, Daniel, that he comes like a thief in the night? What is he going to come to do?
They got the AR-15.
Yeah. Should we be prepping? Should we prepare for an Exodus type journey if everything is cyclical?
Have a backpack ready and look for the light. Head for the light.
Head for the light.
Someone told me that.
Sounds like good advice.
The beam of light, the pillar of light.
I think we'll be warned in a way. I think we'll know when the time comes close. We'll start seeing signs, and I think we'll have to be ready at that point. And that's the point of my YouTube channel, Greater Exodus Vitality Restoration, is to strengthen your body, because I think when you may be called, you might be celebrating a feast day, but you might be caught, with just your shoes, hopefully, and a pair of shorts. And the only thing you're going to have is the strength of your body to survive, going into the land. What? I don't understand, Danny.
I was impressed too. How many times through these verses that you had, all the different chapters to read, how many times they come up with the concept that people would be ever hearing but never understanding, never seeing but never perceiving. Hearts will be calloused. They hardly hear with the ears. They close their eyes. So that's why the one-eyed man is one-eyed man is king. Seeing everybody else blind.
Well, it's like Paul, he was the Pharisees of Pharisees. He had the Torah memorized, and he couldn't see the prophecy of Messiah fulfilled in Yeshua until the scales were removed from his eyes and he could actually see. So I think there is a blindness upon those in the tribe of Judah, a pride that blinds them. And we see that evident highly in, fall of Jerusalem and the wars there, how they just so pridefully fought to the bitter end, despite what happened to them.
It was an awesome picture if you think about it. The physical scale coming off the eyes. Pretty cool pretty vivid of what has to happen.
Melcon asks, how do we test prophecies?
What?
How do we test prophecies?
What do you mean? We're told it's going to happen. We test to see if it happens.
Deuteronomy 13 test.
If it's consistent with God's word and if it comes to be.
It also says if it doesn't come to be, that we're never to listen to that teacher again. And there's a lot of teachers who have prophesied things that didn't happen, but are still up there teaching. People are still listening to them.
Well, because a lot of people are going to be blind and yeah. I mean, there were fake prophets then. There's going to be fake prophets now. I mean, we're never told that they're going to go away.
I agree, Melcon. It should line up with the word perfectly. And I agree with you, Mother.
So are you a fake prophet?
I hope not. I haven't really predicted anything yet.
Good.
I think the Bible has predicted a few things, and that's what I keep myself grounded in. And it's okay to have theories. I'm a big proponent that there is no rapture. That we will be brought into the land. We might be brought up into the air to be brought into the land before the time of the end. But as far as going to heaven and partying while the world suffers, that isn't biblical whatsoever. That's not what we're called to do. We're called to be a witness. And why would you take out, if it's football, that's the most important play of the game. You're going to take out your best players, those who actually believe in God and know His word. You're going to take them out of the game when they're most needed to be witnesses and strong for the world to see. That's a problem. Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat, 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 shalom.
Did you bake your bread last night?
Shabbat, Shabbat. I did. I made pumpkin challah. It was pretty good.
Are you getting better at it?
I've never made pumpkin challah before, so I don't know if I'm getting better at it. Am I getting better at challah in general?
Yeah.
Alex says yes.
That's good.
I've made some bad ones because I get crazy and I try to do it with like whole wheat or random spices.
So when you did the pumpkin one, did you put spices in there too, or just pumpkin?
Pumpkin, spices. I had a pumpkin pie extract that I used, and I used, instead of white sugar, I did brown sugar and a little more brown sugar, or a little more sugar than I normally do. And I used one less egg because I assumed the pumpkin is a type of like egg. So I used one less egg and just added pumpkin. Said I want it to be too doughy. Daniel's got to go. Shabbat shalom, Daniel. Any final questions? Melcon wants me to read Deuteronomy 13. I will do that.
What about Deuteronomy 13?
It's the prophet test, so let's read it.
I don't think Deuteronomy 13 was one of the readings. Was there?
We don't have to be contained to just the readings.
Hey, I have enough trouble just getting through all these. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff.
It was longer, yeah. So if a prophet or someone who gets messages while dreaming arises among you and he gives you a sign or wonder, and the sign or wonder comes about as he predicted when he said, let's follow other gods which you haven't known and let's serve them. Oh, I'll try not to commentate. You are not to listen to what that prophet or dreamer says, for Adonai your God is testing you in order to find out whether you really do love Adonai your God with all your heart and being. You are to follow Adonai your God, fear him, obey his mitzvot, which are instructions, listen to what he says, serve him, and cling to him. And that prophet or dreamer is to be put to death, because he urged rebellion against Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you from a life of slavery in order to seduce you away from the path of Adonai your God, ordered you to follow. This is how you are to rid your community of this wickedness.
All right.
Oh, well, I read it anyways, Melcon, so deal with it. My thoughts on that were a lot of times people are going to seduce you with like signs and wonders and these miracles. And just because someone's doing a miracle doesn't mean that's not demonic. Demons and the devil has power to do things. And that can be very deceiving and alluring, because he wants you to be like, oh, this is good, and do this. And the next thing you know, you're doing divination and stuff like that.
Well, look at that Jim Jones that everybody drank the Kool-Aid for.
Right. I thought of him when I was reading about Masada and Eliezer and everyone committing suicide, how he convinced them all to do that.
Yeah, no, it's true when you think about it. That Jones was done by everybody as a total Play-Doh. And yet, if you talk to the Jews today, they have nothing but admiration for what was done on Masada.
Right.
And they even take their military up there. They stopped doing it for a while, but now they're back doing it again to go and take their final vows to the military on Masada, saying that the country will not fall again.
Yeah. And I guess that depends on how they're saying that too. Like, are we going to actually obey God this time so this doesn't happen? Because again, we need to be rooted in good soil. It's not about just our belligerence, because that their faith was great, because it says like the Sakari, even like they were said to, claim Caesar as emperor or God or whatever, and they refused to do that even unto death and torture, and even their children wouldn't do that. It's like, that's severe faith in God, and I think that's good. Those are attributes we see in the Old Testament, like the Levites, and I think that's part of the problem of the 12 houses of Israel not being together, the 12 tribes. We all have different passions, and we need each other to help guide us. Otherwise, we fall apart. So division is a curse. Ooh, I got 2 likes. Yay.
That's a strong element of Zionism. Zionism is not religion. Zionism is founded in, if we hold the land, then God will bless us, instead of the reverse. And it's important to keep that in perspective, because that's what's taking place when they make that pledge on Masada. So,
Agreed.
Again, they're blind from the perspective that it's all about holding the land.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what they thought about the temple. Surely the temple won't get destroyed, but it already had been destroyed too, with Babylon. So.
It's a testimony to what the temple was, the fact that the Romans, after all they did, they could have completely destroyed everything, and yet they kept that part of the Hasidic wall, the western wall that we walked through, with those huge stones. I mean, they kept that as a testimony to the power of Rome to be able to destroy something that magnificent. It's really the only reason we should have it today.
You think it will be rebuilt soon?
Oh, I know. I certainly think that's huge root of Zionism to do it. We're still hoping that when we take you guys over, you'll be able to get to go through there. I know you were there, but so Alex will get to see it. We're not sure about. We know we're not going to do Bethlehem at all. We're just going to do Jerusalem this time because time is so limited for this trip. And I also am going to be sending you in the next couple weeks, or maybe I'll even have the information by the time you get here. I'm working on dinner reservations. You know, the first 2 nights there's no dinner included. Well, I'm going to be including it, but I have to do reservations. And a couple of them are going to be some authentic Greek restaurants, hopefully, that I'll have to set up in advance and split up the groups or have them go in different time frames type things. So, but anyway, we are going to be able to include the dinners for those first 2 nights.
I like dinner.
Yeah. Well, as I said, but I will be getting in touch. When you see it, don't ignore it because I need you to choose a time and to confirm. So you'll be pretty good about responding to email anyway, so you know it's important. And then the second night, the invitation is going to be you're invited to Dr. Bobby's big fat welcome to Greece dinner party.
Will you be speaking?
No, but we're contracting with a thing. I'll have the buses deliver us there after our day in Corinth, and there's a restaurant that has music and Greek dancing, and they teach all of that as a dinner. So it's actually going to be like a dinner bash thing that I'm throwing in there because we did so well with our flights. I actually had some money left over to do some neat things this time. But now I'm starting to work on 2021. It's time to take me to go ahead.
Do you mind if we close out the topic here so I can shut down?
Oh, I thought you said goodbye to everybody else. I'm sorry.
I think there's some watching. I don't know if they're still watching, but any final thoughts before we say goodbye to?
I'm so sorry. I thought you said goodbye.
I think Daniel left, but I still see 2 people watching. Any final thoughts, anyone there on the chat or Bobby on this key Tavo when you come out or when you come into the land? I think if you do good things, be blessed. If you do bad things, be cursed. That's how I'd summarize it. All right. Thanks, Melkon. Peace out, everyone. Have an amazing Shabbat.
Okay, bye.
Not you.